Buenos días a todos. Es un placer para nosotros estar acá. Los saluda Bruno Guío, presidente del CFA Society Perú. Nosotros somos una sociedad que engloba varios participantes del mercado financiero y de capitales en el Perú. Lo que apuntamos es hacia la profesionalización del mercado de capitales en el Perú. Es decir, que la gente cada día esté más capacitada y de alguna manera que el CFA penetre más y que sea un estándar de calidad profesional en nuestro mercado. También para nosotros es muy importante todos los temas de ética, o sea, no solo queremos la profesionalización, sino la ética y un buen comportamiento que promovemos en el mercado, ¿no? Basados en los códigos de ética que promueve el CFA, y que si bien puedes tener un mercado chico, pero ideal es que es un mercado sumamente correcto y que todos los participantes sean tratados de manera justa. Otro tema que hacemos acá en el CFA Society Perú, estamos muy enfocados en todo el tema de educación, ¿no? Que va de la mano con la profesionalización. Y para educación, bueno, estamos muy activos con el sector de universidades, en los concursos de casos de ética, casos de evaluación de empresas, y en el tema de profesionales más establecidos, siempre con los webinars, en temas muy especiales, temas de mucho interés, como el que tenemos hoy día. Importante precisar que parte de nuestra estrategia como sociedad es traer acá a gente que practica, ¿no? No solo gente que esté en el mundo académico, sino también gente que participa, que invierte, que compra, que vende, que tiene experiencia, que también le han pasado varias crisis. O sea, ese es el tipo de gente que queremos poner adelante de ustedes, de tal forma que aprenden o confirman ideas, digamos, de gente que es sumamente experimentada, pero en la cancha, ¿no? En la cancha y con buena base teórica. Finalmente, muy contento de tener esta conferencia. Activos digitales, es todo un universo muy grande. No sabemos si ya es un asset class o no, hay discusión y empiezan a aparecer índices invertibles, hay todavía muchos jugadores, muchas áreas para invertir, entonces es un área de mucho interés y verdaderamente también de gente que quiere aprender, gente que no lo termina de entender, gente que considera que tiene todavía mucho riesgo, etcétera. Y también lo más importante y en el fondo de todos estos activos digitales, esta revolución que parece que se viene, donde pasaríamos a un sistema web 3, ¿no? Que va a ser un cambio radical en todo lo que venimos haciendo en los últimos 20 años, ¿no? Bueno, dicho esto, les agradezco su presencia, muy contentos de empezar con el seminario y le paso la palabra a Melvin Escudero, que es director regional para el CFA Institute con respecto a todos los temas de advocacy y presidente anterior del CFA Society Perú. Dale, Melvin.
Muchas gracias, Bruno. Buenos días con todos. Como ya lo mencionó Bruno, siempre algo muy positivo que continuemos con este tipo de eventos. En particular, explorando también nuevas áreas en las finanzas globales. Hace unos meses hicimos nosotros una encuesta entre nuestros miembros para identificar cuáles eran los tópicos de mayor interés. Uno de esos tópicos resultó ser el tema de activos digitales y es precisamente el foro que nos convoca el día de hoy. Voy a cambiar al inglés. Tenemos 3 expositores con nosotros, cada uno muy destacado en su campo. 2 de ellos van a hacer la presentación en inglés y uno de ellos va a hacer la presentación en español. Entonces vamos a tener un panel bilingüe, digamos algo así como Span-English, ¿no? Combinando entre los 2 temas. Recordemos la parte logística. The logistic of the event is basically we will give each of our panelists around 15 minutes, not more than that, to do a small presentation. After the 3 of them have finished it, we will start with the Q&A process. Remember that at the platform, at the bottom, you have a Q&A icon. You could use this icon to introduce your questions whenever you like. So we will start with our first speaker, Mervin Rangel. Mervyn Rangel is the Chief Executive Officer at Banex Coin. He has a degree in Informatics Engineering from Colegio Universitario de Caracas. He has worked as Chief Executive Officer at Global Bridge Connection, a company dedicated at the development of technology in payment methods and parawatts, a company specialized in the design and implementation of data centers at high scale. He's actually the founder, shareholder, and chief executive officer at Banex Coin, the first regulated cryptoactive exchange house in Peru. Le vamos a dar la bienvenida a Mervyn y muchas gracias por participar con nosotros. Adelante, Mervyn, con tu presentación. 15 minutos. Audio, Mervyn.
Ok, muchas gracias, Melvin. Buenos días a todos, primero que nada. Y muchas gracias a CFA Society Perú por esta oportunidad. Arrancamos con la presentación. Ok, arrancamos tenemos acá la agenda, vamos a hablar un poco sobre lo básico y fundamental. ¿Qué es el blockchain? El blockchain, en pocas palabras, es un libro contable digital donde sus principales características son las siguientes. Es un libro contable inmutable, descentralizado y público. Y adicionalmente utiliza la criptografía como capa de seguridad. Si vemos un poco la gráfica, para dar la similitud al caso de blockchain, ponemos el libro contable que lleva un banco. Un banco lleva un libro contable donde se guardan registros. La diferencia es que los bancos no tienen, bajo ninguna circunstancia, hacen su libro contable público. Siempre es un libro contable privado. Todo esto se guarda y nadie tiene acceso a esta información. En el caso de blockchain es totalmente opuesto. Todos pueden tener acceso a la información que se guarda en la blockchain y al ser registros inmutables, automáticamente todos tenemos la certeza o la seguridad de que la información que está contenida dentro de ese libro o registro contable es exactamente el mismo que todos los participantes ven. Esto está asegurado gracias a la criptografía que se utiliza como una capa de seguridad, dándole fortaleza y seguridad a toda la información que se contiene dentro de este gran libro contable. Otras características que tienen las blockchains es que son utilizados generalmente para sistemas descentralizados sin intermediarios de confianza. El libro contable o ledger, como normalmente se le conoce, es compartido, transparente y se replica en cada nodo de la red o, en su defecto, entre cada participante dentro de la blockchain. Dentro de las blockchain, generalmente solo se pueden agregar transacciones, no se pueden modificar las transacciones que anteriormente se colocaron. Solo se pueden crear nuevas transacciones que hacen que una transacción anterior cambie, mas no cambia la transacción anterior. Simplemente se genera una nueva transacción dándole un cambio. Si ponemos un ejemplo, pudiera ser como un registro público. Cuando tú compras o vendes un inmueble, al cambiar de dueño, el registro queda asentado de que hubo una persona como dueño de ese inmueble anteriormente y tú eres el nuevo dueño. Básicamente de eso se trata. Cada entrada en el ledger es permanente y se refleja en todas las copias de los nodos de la red. Esto quiere decir que todos los participantes dentro de una blockchain tienen la misma copia del ledger o tienen la misma copia de la red, del registro contable que se lleva. Las transacciones son validadas sin necesidad de intermediarios de confianza. Esto quiere decir que más allá de la tecnología, no existe un tercero de confianza o un ente centralizado que valide estas transacciones. Las transacciones tienen que ser validadas prácticamente por todos los participantes de la red. más allá del blockchain, del Bitcoin. La tecnología blockchain ha permitido que surjan como digamos, como primera tecnología, o su primer uso, su primera aplicación, fue en el Bitcoin, fue su primer caso de uso, que es la primera moneda digital inventada hasta en el año 2009, y cuyo lleva aproximadamente 11, 12 años en funcionamiento, y ha logrado completar con éxito hasta el día de hoy todas las transacciones sin tener prácticamente ningún error. Pero sin embargo, las blockchain tienen múltiples utilidades. No solamente se limita al intercambio de valor. Las blockchain también se utilizan para almacenamientos en la nube, para identidad digital, para registros públicos, verificación de datos, para verificación de cadenas de suministro. Se pueden utilizar para contratos inteligentes, entre otras aplicaciones. Básicamente son la base de lo que hoy conocemos como Web 3.0. Aquí podemos ver un poco de qué son las criptomonedas. Las criptomonedas son básicamente dinero digital o una forma de transferencia de valor el cual utiliza la blockchain como su base tecnológica. ¿Qué las hace especial? Que son descentralizadas, no hay una entidad que las controle, no se pueden cambiar parámetros sin previo consenso dentro del código fuente o dentro de la concepción de una criptomoneda. ¿Y por qué las llaman criptomonedas? Porque están blindadas bajo la criptografía y usan técnicas criptográficas para mantener la seguridad de la red y para mantener las transacciones 100% seguras. Existen varios tipos de criptomonedas, entre ellas la principal o la más conocida, que es el Bitcoin. Se puede categorizar como una criptomoneda utilizada para el intercambio de valor, o es el primer caso de éxito en blockchain para intercambiar valor, o es la primera moneda digital que existió. Luego nacieron a través de la blockchain, al ser público, nacieron otras monedas llamadas altcoins, que de acuerdo a su connotación o de acuerdo al uso que se le dé, pueden tener también un valor, pero a su vez el valor está basado en el uso que se le da. Por ejemplo, en el caso de Ethereum, su base o su principal valor está en el hecho de los smart contracts. Con Ethereum tú puedes desarrollar contratos inteligentes que se corren dentro de la red de Ethereum y que son validados por todos los participantes dentro de la blockchain de Ethereum. Luego, estas altcoins a su vez le dieron vida a lo que llaman stablecoins. Las stablecoins son monedas que su mismo nombre lo dice, están basadas en monedas fiat o en dinero fiat, y que a su vez la emisión de estos tokens equivalen. Hay en el caso de USDC, por ejemplo, hay $1 respaldando cada token que se emite en la cadena que utilice para ese momento. Puede ser, si hay $100 emitidos en USDC, su valor equivale a $100 en el mundo real, o lo puedes intercambiar por $100 reales en efectivo en el ente que lo emite. Las stablecoins generalmente son centralizadas. El principal ejemplo que pudiésemos poner de una stablecoin es, si hablamos de Perú, Yape pudiera ser una stablecoin si utilizara blockchain como método de transporte o como tecnología de transporte. En este caso, no lo hace, por eso no está dentro de este ecosistema, es un ecosistema cerrado. El USDC, por ejemplo, está desarrollado en varias blockchain, en Ethereum, en Solana. Hay varias cadenas donde pueden coexistir y simplemente cada cadena lo que le da es el protocolo de transporte. Hablemos un poquito sobre criterios para decidir inversiones en cripto. Es un tema bastante delicado, ya que por lo general no suelo dar asesorías de inversión. Por lo tanto, la decisión de invertir en criptodivisas, al ser delicado y un tanto riesgoso, siempre recomiendo a las personas que hagan su propia investigación para tomar la decisión en base a su propio conocimiento, a lo que puedan ustedes entender de las criptomonedas. Siempre recomiendo no entrar en el mundo de las criptomonedas si no tienen el conocimiento adecuado, si no tienen la capacitación para poder entender cómo funciona y que las fluctuaciones del mercado están dentro de su naturaleza. Eso es fundamental. Siempre recomiendo analicen el mercado. Hay varias herramientas que te permiten hacerlo, como CoinMarketCap, como CoinGecko. También tienes otras herramientas que son un poco más analíticas y te pueden permitir hacer tu propia investigación. Pero la base fundamental para decidir entrar en una inversión cripto es haz tu propia investigación, haz tus consultas. No confíes en personas que te aconsejen invertir si no estás 100% seguro de lo que estás haciendo. Siempre recomiendo hagan investigaciones. Hay diversas formas de analizar los mercados financieros, sin embargo, hay las técnicas que normalmente se utilizan son los análisis fundamentales, los análisis técnicos. Esas técnicas también se pueden, o por lo general se utilizan también en el mercado cripto, pero a su vez también tienes que tomar en cuenta los riesgos financieros. Entre ellos, las criptomonedas no se escapan, así como el mercado de acciones no se escapan de la volatilidad, de la liquidez que tengan los exchanges, los riesgos de cumplimiento y sobre todo de la utilidad que tenga la moneda o el token en el cual nosotros hayamos decidido invertir. Si tienes un token que tiene una utilidad específica, por ejemplo, que sea utilizado para un fin específico, para registros de identidad, y es un proyecto que, según tu análisis, tiene un futuro, puedes invertir en él. Más sin embargo, eso no te garantiza de que tengas éxito en esa inversión. Siempre, insisto, lo importante es hacer un análisis de todo lo que previo a cualquier tipo de inversión en cripto. ¿Cómo ingresar al mundo de las criptomonedas o al criptoespacio? Existen en el mercado actualmente 3 tipos de casas de cambio, por llamarlas así. Los exchanges vienen siendo como los bancos en el mundo cripto. Sirven como un intermediario entre el usuario, donde las personas pueden ir y comprar criptomonedas. Existen varios tipos de exchanges, entre ellos están los exchanges centralizados, que su palabra lo dice, tienen una estructura como un banco o como una entidad. En algunos lugares son reguladas, en otros lugares no son reguladas y normalmente tienen todo tipo de controles de cara al conoce tu cliente, prevención del lavado de dinero y tienen constante monitoreo para poder ayudar a las personas a comprar, custodiar y ingresar de manera sencilla al mundo de las criptomonedas. Luego tienes los exchanges descentralizados, que son exchanges donde la custodia no la hace un tercero, la hace la misma persona con sus claves privadas o con su billetera, y los intercambios se realizan gracias a los contratos inteligentes. En este caso, no hay intervención humana más allá de cada uno de los participantes, no hay un tercero de confianza, no existe ningún tipo digamos, de seguridad más allá de la que te proporciona la misma blockchain o el protocolo con el que estés trabajando. Y por lo general requieren un conocimiento bastante alto de la materia de Web 3.0 y el uso de las billeteras para no incurrir en pérdidas. Luego tienen los exchanges peer-to-peer, donde viene a ser como una combinación entre los centralizados y los descentralizados, donde las transacciones son persona a persona, o la comparación más lógica que pudiésemos darle es lo que sucede en Mercado Libre, por ejemplo. Tú entras a Mercado Libre y en Mercado Libre te conecta un vendedor con un comprador. En este caso, los exchanges peer-to-peer son plataformas centralizadas de terceros, pero su trabajo no es hacer el intercambio de ellos mismos, simplemente te conectan a un comprador con un vendedor para llevar a cabo la transacción. Bueno, para cerrar, simplemente les hago una reflexión con respecto al tema de las criptomonedas. Para todos aquellos que quieran entrar en el mundo de las criptomonedas, les recomiendo documentarse bien, estudiar acerca de el tema, sobre todo entender las bases tecnológicas, cómo funciona. No es necesario que seas una persona experta, pero sí entender la base tecnológica para que puedas estar seguro en lo que estás haciendo, para que puedas tener certeza en cualquier tipo de inversión y no incurras en pérdidas, ni te dejes llevar por personas que tal vez te prometen algún tipo de ganancia que no está contemplada sobre algún tipo de token o de criptomoneda que no está previamente respaldada por un proyecto. Le doy las gracias nuevamente.
Gracias, Mervin. Ahora vamos a pasar con la presentación de nuestro siguiente expositor, es Claudio Izquierdo. Claudio is the Co-Chief Executive Officer at Bit5 Funds. He has a bachelor degree in Business Administration and Finance from Florida International University. He worked as Chief Operating Officer at Participar Capital, financial arm of RPC Holdings, one of the South Florida's largest real estate development groups, and previously he worked as Senior Financial Advisor for HSBC Securities. He has a long experience in international fund creation and distribution with the largest global financial institutions. Welcome, Claudio. Could you start your presentation, please?
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, extremely excited to be part of the CFA Society in Peru. As with Melvin, we're expanding quite a bit in the region. We have an asset management division that I run with our team, and we're happy to say that we actually have the first Bitcoin mining fund in the world. And that's a big thing to understand, sometimes to validate, but this is true. As far as the Bitcoin mining world, we are the first. But before I get to that, the story of the company that I am part of, that I represent, Bit5, the story starts with my business partner, Robert Collazo. So he started the company in 2011. He started in the industry in 2011. And with that, Bit5 began operating in 2015. Bit5 today is one of the largest Bitcoin mining hosting companies in the United States. We plan on being the largest in the US and the world. We solely do operations here in the US. We have worked abroad in the past in Sweden, big operations, but we chose the US because of the stability that the US offers us in the political aspect, taxing aspect, the registration regulations, etc. This is our home country. This is where we live. This is where we operate. So we decided, hey, let's stick to doing what we know how to do. And what is that? Hosting miners. With that said, I'd like to give you a little tour on the inside of what it looks like in a Bitcoin mining hosting company. There's a few verticals and they're all integrated on how it works. And the Bitcoin mining process, and then you just heard an explanation by Mervin, is basically the software system, the registration, the validation of a peer-to-peer system created in 2008 in a white paper. But the history of that and the beauty of that, it's an evolution of softwares. It's not like someone just came up with the idea, Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, the pseudonym, and said, oh, I have a great idea. No, it is the evolution of various ideas to create a decentralized system, easy to transact and to transfer some value or some asset, in this case, a peer-to-peer cash digital system. And that's the great thing about this. And that's why I'm such a big believer in it, because I think maybe it's not the perfect way of doing it, but it's the closest that we have to it. And it just evolves and keeps getting bigger. We're part of that. As miners, what we do with a miner is a computer. A miner validates a transaction that's held in an open ledger. Think of it as the record keeper or the accountant of Bitcoin. That's what we do. But to understand that and a little more of how it gets done, I'm going to walk into the factory floor so you can see how it all gets made. It begins with data centers, and that's what we built here. And we're based out of Medley, Florida. That's out of Miami. And this is what it looks like on our floor. This behind what you see here is a container. We built 20 to 24 of these per month. I'm gonna go inside a little now, but I'll make sure you guys get a look at what it looks like. These are racks that the miners are held on. Hey guys, held on. So we hold 280 miners inside of these data centers. It's a controlled environment. And by controlled environment, we control the most important part, which is the temperature. We have an evap system that's created. It sucks in cold air and makes it easy to run 280 miners inside. It runs on 1 megawatt of electrical power. And this is the area you see here of what we do. These are new and miners, the Bitmain miners. They're the largest company in the space. These are old miners, this is what they look like, and these are new ones. But this is what we do as far as the manufacturing of the entire area. Now I go in here, and this is our HQ on the tech side of everything. So what we do is we have on the vertically integrated part, we have a software system that runs these miners, and these are our operations, all live. This is South Carolina, and can you guys speak a little loud? Sorry guys, it's a little loud in here. I'm gonna go back to the office, but I just wanted you to get an idea of what a company that's in this space looks like and what we do here in Miami, even though we do not run them in the state of Florida because the electrical price here is too expensive. What we do, and let me change back to me, we run these miners in South Carolina and Texas and Georgia. Why? Because we have inexpensive energy. So we run basically on 4 cents to 4.5 cents a kilowatt in the state of South Carolina with nuclear energy. And that's a big point to this industry. In the US, even though you heard a while back, Elon Musk made a comment on the energy on miners. Well, the US runs majority of the miners in the US and North America. We run on clean energy. We have done solar energy, we have done wind, even hydroelectric. Today, we are running on nuclear energy. We go out to these little towns in the United States that have what's called stranded energy. It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. No one's consuming it. And the origin of that energy is nuclear. We use Duke Energy and Dominion Energy. So these are very large publicly traded companies that offer us this inexpensive energy. We build a site, and this site is where we put these pods that you see that run on 1 megawatt of electrical power. Our biggest partner today is Bitmain, which are the manufacturers of those miners that you saw out there. But it's a lot of moving parts to be able to validate this. And the US is becoming and will be, from the direction of the industry, the largest country when it comes to mining. What happened, just a little history of what happened and with the evolution of that, is that before 70% of the miners were in China. The Chinese government stopped and made it illegal for you to mine in China. Not only did it make it illegal for you to mine in China, it prohibits every Chinese citizen to own crypto. So you saw a big dip at the end of the year because December 31st of 2021 of last year, that was the last day that you can hold a crypto account without it being illegal in China. It's incredible how that happened. And why? Well, they want to control it, right? The whole idea and the whole ideology behind Bitcoin is exactly not to be controlled. Have that decentralization and make it easy. And then I always say this, and this is something that I'd like to leave you with, is never bet against technology. And I see the movement from Amazon starting in 1994, when no one said, hey, I'm going to buy everything on the internet. No one wanted to put your credit card on any internet website. And look at the evolution of Amazon, the Tesla electric vehicle movement, all these pieces, all this technology growing. You're always going to have people saying negative comments, either that they don't understand it completely, they haven't dived deep into it. And like Benjamin said, I think everyone out there should just get a little more knowledge of how this works, how we operate. When you start seeing that and how simplistic it really is, because at least on my side, on the mining side, we control everything. We control the price of the miner. We control the electrical costs, the build out, the CapEx, the capital expenditure to be able to produce one Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, that all comes down to a math problem. A math problem, which if you can Google this, it's Bitcoin mining calculator. You will know by the type of miner, by the velocity that your miner has on closing what's called the hash rate, the global hash rate, which is what happens every 10 minutes, which is that famous blockchain. So these miners that we operate, that the world has, that makes it impenetrable by hackers, because there's a million miners all over the world. There's not 10, 15, there's not a data center located in one site and then another backup data center. No, these are millions of miners all over the world closing the blockchain. And that's why the evolution of the blockchain has become so incredible too, that it's very secure. It's the most secure system in the world today, and it's being adopted into other sides of banking, of municipalities here in the United States. Cities are starting to use these blockchain processing and so on. So with that said, I'm going to leave you with this our view on what we do. We're very bullish right now. I don't know what the bottom is. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I can't call the bottom every time, but I see and I feel that we're close to it. That's just on the variable part, which is the actual price of Bitcoin. For us as a mining side, I can calculate exactly what we will produce on everything going forward. So for me, as a builder of all these infrastructures, it's a great time. It's like you being a land buyer or a real estate buyer in 2010, in the United States. You pretty much got in close to the bottom, if not the bottom. That's how we see this. So it's a great time for us. It's exciting. You know, the Bitcoin's on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's on the Chicago Board of Options Exchange. So it's a lot of positive movement. Early adoption phase. Eventually that will start becoming bigger and bigger. The demand curve will increase. And the beauty of this, the limited supply of Bitcoin. There are 19 million Bitcoins in the world today. There will only be 21 million. That's it. So if you take a stock flow model and start diving deep into what that could mean, well, then you could see people like Kathy Woods, ARK Investment, putting Bitcoin at $1 million just based on a simple demand curve. Well, thank you very much. And please, enjoy the rest of this webinar. If any questions, reach out to us. We're open for everything.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Now we are going with our next and final panelist. He is Kyle De Cruz. He is the Director of Digital Asset Products at Banek. He joined Banek in 2017 and serves as a Director in Digital Asset Products. He is responsible for product development and expanding Banek's digital asset products offering. as well as the management and market strategy of Banec's existing digital assets product lineup. Prior joining Banec, Mr. Da Cruz served as a product information analyst with Putnam Investments. He received a bachelor's degree from the University of New Hampshire. Welcome, Kyle. Nice to see you again. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruno and Melvin. Thank you for having me, and to our panelists. It's going to be difficult to follow these guys because they're phenomenal, but I will try my best. So just as a background of me, again, thank you, Melvin, for the introduction. But from our firm point of view, I work for Banec, which is a traditional asset manager with over 85 billion in AUM. And from a crypto standpoint, we have roughly about 500 million now, just in pure crypto exposure. Of course, as you can imagine, with the market downturn now, this number was much higher about a month and a half ago. And so we're not just new into the space and taking advantage of all the media attention around crypto. We've really been into crypto since early 2017, when we identified that digital assets, and then in that point, particularly Bitcoin, could be a great store of value alternative and really be disruptive to a lot of different industries going forward, and not just the finance side, but also advertising, media, banking, etc. And so why would we invest? Why would we invest for ourselves? Why would we recommend our clients invest? And well, this started in 2017 with identifying what are the investment opportunities. And so when we looked at the space, we said, well, there are really three. There's an opportunity for a store of value, there's an opportunity for growth, and there's an opportunity for a fixed income-like exposure or an ability to get yield out of the space. And so the store of value, we didn't have too difficult of a time, and I think Claudia would agree with me, is Bitcoin really is the champion there. It's proven itself over time, and we'll get into a little bit more details of why that Bitcoin is very different from the rest of crypto. And the second is the growth opportunities bucket, which we think would be more akin to what you're normally invest in, securities or public equities. And really, we think what fits into this bucket is other traditional crypto assets like Ethereum and smart contract type platform, or even Metaverse type assets. And those are the two really groups we're going to focus on today, because the topic is Bitcoin, smart contract, and Metaverse. But of course, there's much beyond that in the fixed income side of the lending space as well. And I won't spend too much time on this because I know my co-panelists here covered this a lot, but really the basics are why does blockchain technology matter? Well, it's distributed and stored across multiple networks. It's immutable because that data is distributed. It can't be altered by one single participant. It's efficient. It provides faster verification and settlement compared to traditional banking systems, and it's auditable. So that means the data can be verified and checked for accuracy all around the world. Any one of us could go right now and run our own nodes and really verify the blockchain. And so why Bitcoin? Well, it's the world's first blockchain. And again, going back to the last slide of what the blockchain means and why it has benefits, well, it really shines through in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no bank or central authority. It presents an alternative to a central bank controlled money. The supply of Bitcoin is not infinite. It's capped at 21 million, not there yet. And the guys like Claudio will bring us there. But eventually the amount of new Bitcoins that are issued will decline to zero. And that means at that point, there will be no new Bitcoin. And again, going back to the last slide, immutable and secure. The Bitcoin network has proven itself over a decade now that it is the most secure blockchain and suppresses access and deny, and it's impossible to suppress access to deny transactions. And again, this chart is a little outdated now, and you might see a little bit of drawdown at the end, but the story is over time, this is a young and growing asset class. And over this short decade, it's really shown tremendous returns. And so when we look at this short time and where we're going to go forward, we like to break it up into 5 phases. So if you look on the right here, from 2011 roughly to 2017, it was generally viewed as a proof of technology, giant volatility, not as much exposure to the retail population, and really an improving state. By phase 2, we think the technology has proven itself. From 2017 to 2021, it was starting to become adopted, first by the retail side, eventually by institutions, and we believe it's still volatile. It's come down a bit since then, but it started to prove itself as its use case. Currently, right now, from 2021 until who knows when, we think it's in the third phase. And we think it's gone through some significant tests, such as the China ban, ESG shutdowns, new all-time highs, increasing institutional adoption, and perhaps smaller drawdowns. Although you might see here, we hypothecated that it would be roughly a 50% drawdown. I think we've already passed that now. But again, a young and maturing asset class, it's subject to market events. And then phase 4 and phase 5 would be at some point in the future, which is continued political certainty. So we think regulation, particularly in the US, would help support the case and increase adoption. And it would actually make a lot of institutions more comfortable in the US with handling Bitcoin. Once this tipping point occurs, I see a fast runway from stage 4 to stage 5. Stage 5 being the final phase. And we view that Bitcoin has the potential to have half the market cap of gold. The gold is roughly $11 trillion market cap. If Bitcoin were to achieve half of that, you're looking at roughly a 250K per coin price, or even higher, depending on the metric. And I always like to show this portfolio. The pink line in the middle is a 60-40 equities and bonds portfolio. And if you look at just adding a very small allocation to Bitcoin in your portfolio, can actually improve performance quite significantly over time. And if the S&P 500 is the gray line. And so a 3% allocation to Bitcoin in a 60-40 portfolio with bonds actually gives you the same, roughly the same performance as pure S&P exposure over the last few years. That's quite incredible considering that stocks have been on a tear in a bull market in the US for a few years. And so when we think beyond Bitcoin and the other altcoins, we started thinking about it a few years back as how do we look at all of these coins? There's so many different ones. We know what Bitcoin is. It serves its purpose. That's clear. But what about this entire universe of other assets? And so what we did is we hired a head of research and we said, your first job is to categorize the entire space of digital assets. And so we did that with these 8 different categories here. And so we have a few: store of value, which includes Bitcoin, smart contract platforms, which includes all the layer 1s that use smart contract technology like Ethereum, infrastructure, media and entertainment being the category that covers the metaverse. And so really we found that there are really 4 of these categories that are investable today, and those are covered in the boxes here. And you'll see that there are DeFi, the metaverse, infrastructure, and smart contract platforms. And so for today, we're going to focus more of this topic on the smart contracts in the metaverse. And these categories were actually launched as indices through our index subsidiary, Market Vector Solutions, and they're available on Bloomberg for all of you to use at your leisure to help in your research and to understand the space better. And so really the point of this chart is to show, well, why did we do this? Why does it matter if we carve up the ecosystem of digital assets? And well, if you look at, as asset classes mature and they grow from young to mature, they are naturally diversified. And so this is actually a chart of the stock market from the early 1800s to now. And you'll see over time, it's become quite diversified. And GIC sectors help investors bet on specific sectors and specific types of investors. And we believe that the cryptocurrency market needs a similar framework to be able to diversify and understand what we're looking at. So circling back a little bit, we're going to touch on the smart contracts and the technology that's used to really build what we believe is most of the infrastructure in the digital asset world. And this is a quote on the left by our CEO, Jan van Eck. In 2020, he said, the conceptual building block enabling the building of a new Wall Street is the ability to build logic into software for smart contracts. So what that means is the technology to take out a middleman on a deal. So you can actually trust a deal on the other side that everything will be locked and things will not settle until both sides of the deal both fill their side. And on the right is a chart actually of Ethereum and the percent of Ethereum supply locked inside smart contracts. So you can see over time, more and more, not only users, but also developers are using smart contracts to conduct business. And so smart contracts really serve as a tool to create these financial ecosystems of digital assets. And there are a few different ways an ecosystem you can do. And so smart contracts allow the building of capital assets, so producing an ongoing store of value, valued at a net present value of expected returns. and owners have a claim on that network's future network fees. It helps create an ecosystem where crypto can be used as a consumable asset. So you can consume it, transform it into another asset, but it does not yield an ongoing stream of value. So for most digital assets, the underlying currency is consumed via transaction fees anytime value is transferred. So you might hear of the terminology paying gas fees on Ethereum. Every time you transfer on the Ethereum blockchain and utilize that technology, you're paying a gas fee for that service. And the last is, again, a store of value, something that cannot be consumed, nor can it generate income, but it holds its value. So most digital assets can be paired with other assets and locked via a smart contract and used as collateral, particularly useful in decentralized exchanges. So what is Ethereum? Well, Ethereum is the world's computer. It's really a global open source platform for decentralized applications. You can use internet money to write code that controls digital value. If we look at the charts here, you can see that not only the transactions and the value of these transactions have been increasing on the Ethereum network, but the revenues attributed to Ethereum have been increasing over time. And these revenues are really a product of those fees being transferred. And as owning these Ethereum coins, you accrue the value that is being transacted. Well, how does Ethereum in a smart contract world relate to the metaverse and NFTs? Well, the thing is, these topics are not siloed. They're all interconnected. And so when we talk about the metaverse, it always helps to talk about Ethereum and smart contracts first, because we believe that Ethereum and smart contracts are the building blocks of the metaverse. A lot of the apps that are being built in the metaverse and creating these digital worlds start on being built on top of these layer 1 blockchains. The smart contracts are the building blocks of not only Web3, NFTs, but the entire metaverse. And NFTs are non-fungible tokens, employ that smart contract technology, and represent digital ownership of a unique item. NFTs have evolved in a very short amount of time, from simple images and GIFs and in art to actually incorporating real world utility. So oftentimes when we think of NFTs, we think of a digital piece of art, a bored ape that's selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we wonder, why does this have any value? Well, that's not all that NFTs are. NFTs have a pretty broad use case that actually could benefit the future building of the metaverse in a very different way than just representing digital art. So when we talk about the metaverse, there are certain characteristics that are always coincide with the building of a new metaverse. And really, these four are the key ones. It's large scale. It should facilitate a large number of individual users participating and interacting at the same time. It's interoperable, meaning that users should be able to move from one platform to another seamlessly, because the underlying blockchain technology facilitates open-ended movement and the transfer of assets from one world to another. Synchronous and persistent, so platforms and virtual worlds should remain constant in place for users over time. Meaning, if they're built correctly and they're not a closed source metaverse, they should be open forever. That if a certain company goes under or a certain company goes bankrupt, that metaverse world should continue over time. And the fourth is 3D and virtual. 3D virtual reality headsets will eventually facilitate a fully immersive experience in the metaverse for participants. However, today, this technology is not fully scaled yet. And so often you can see a lot of the metaverse we interact with can be interacted right through your web browser on your computer. Well, why do NFTs matter in the metaverse? Well, one, they're interoperable by design and intent, and they can bridge the gap between real world and digital world items. And so what I mean by that is you could sell an asset, a property in the real world, attach it to an NFT, and that could stand as the property rights of that asset. And that asset could be used in the metaverse as well, or vice versa. And so again, going back to the point I made earlier, is NFTs and the metaverse are not just art and digital pictures. There are quite a few different categories. However, most of the media and the attention is always focused on these bored apes that are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the reality is the use case is much broader than that. And particularly for me, an interesting one is music and royalties in the top left corner. You'll see a lot of quite big names like the rapper Nas or the DJ Chainsmokers have actually made NFTs of their music royalty stream. And if you own those NFTs, you actually have the right to future royalties that music produces. Play to earn is another category where you own an NFT, you can actually play into a certain metaverse, and you can actually earn assets in game. So getting paid for your activity in that metaverse. And then to me, one of the most exciting and ones that we're using today is really ticketing and membership. So you can actually issue NFTs, and those can be rights to a membership, to a group, to a club, to an event, to a concert, whatever the activity may be. And essentially that serves as a ticket and right to an event. And so you look in the picture here, you see a little space guy with a VIP. VanEck has actually issued an NFT for free to our friends and clients. And those NFTs allow our prospective clients, our new clients, our old clients to actually join our events. So whether that's private webinars, whether that's parties or educational seminars we host, anyone who holds these NFTs is allowed to come. So there really are quite a broad use case or a group of use cases for NFTs in the metaverse as a whole. And I don't think we're going to see what that looks like for another 10 years. And we're really just scratching the surface. From an investing standpoint, well, why do we invest in the metaverse now? If I just said we're 10 years away from really seeing what the metaverse can do, why is it worth investing in now? Well, according to a report by PwC, by 2025, the global metaverse market size may reach 476 billion. So if you look at today, primarily most of the revenue in the metaverse is being driven by advertising right in the middle here. But eventually, you'll start to see the growth of aspects connecting with the real world and connecting these two worlds together. And just for clarification, the two different colors here, VR is virtual reality and AR is augmented reality. The difference being VR would be in a headset, AR would meaning using your phone to see something in the metaverse, but through your camera in the real world. And I love to show this chart because I think it's very timely. You might be seeing a lot of media attention on how the crypto market has lost 2/3 of its market cap. It's been a rough go. And I think Claudia mentioned before, it's not easy to predict a bottom in this asset class. And in fact, I would say it's nearly impossible. And so one of the things we like to say is, look, this is a young and emerging asset class. It's subject to it's very event driven and it's subject to headline risk. And so the reality is the true way to invest in this asset class is to dollar cost average in over time. And in my personal opinion, we could be anywhere between panic and capitulation in this market cycle. And lastly, just wanted to touch on a few of the risks in the digital asset space broadly. So obviously, I think we're all aware of the volatility risk. It's a new and exciting asset class. However, it is very volatile, and that's likely to be for the foregoing future. However, dollar cost averaging in over time and buying baskets and not knowing which one's going to be the winner should help you smooth the ride over time. Certainly, fraud and cyber attack are a risk. Less so with different blockchains. Again, this entire ecosystem has very, very idiosyncratic risks to each blockchain. We view Bitcoin very different than we do the other assets. We think other asset classes, other assets and blockchains, such as newer created ones, are more subject to fraud and cyber attack than maybe other mature ones, such as Bitcoin, which has kind of solidified their technology a little bit more. Again, further to that blockchain risk. So of course, these are new technologies, and at any time the risks are that a new technology could emerge. For instance, Solana, Cardano, there are many others that are faster, cheaper than Ethereum. Now that doesn't mean they will win Ethereum and take market share, because Ethereum is quite the incumbent with multitudes higher of number of developers, but the risk is that new technologies could always replace the old. Regulatory risk, particularly this is an issue in the US, is the reality is that it's still a gray area in a lot of jurisdictions for regulatory risk. However, my personal opinion is I think regulation will come. I think it will be positive. And I think the ecosystem has grown too large to be completely shut down. I think we saw it in China when China banned Bitcoin mining. I think there was a lot of naysayers at the time that thought that would kill the industry, that would kill Bitcoin. And in fact, it's quite the opposite, as Claudio alluded to. Miners with their ability to move, to go where they need to go to for not only cheap energy, but also to be in the right regulatory regime, this is a very hard to kill asset class that is very resilient and robust. And lastly, early stage company risk. There are over 19,000 digital assets today, and a lot of these projects are in development. Some will see adoption and use case happen, some will not, and it's hard to guess which of the winners are going to be. So outside of Bitcoin, we always propose to dollar cost average in and to buy a basket approach. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Kyle. A very, very interesting presentation. Okay, we will start now the Q&A session. A todos los participantes les pido que ingresen sus preguntas a través del icono Q&A en la parte inferior de la plataforma, y yo les voy a estar trasladando a nuestros panelistas las preguntas, ¿no? Vamos a empezar primero con Mervin. Mervin, ¿cuál es tu experiencia en Perú? ¿Cómo evalúas el mercado peruano en temas de estructura y de interés para los activos digitales, Bitcoin, Ethereum? Tu impresión del crecimiento, ¿cómo estás viendo tú al inversionista peruano? ¿Institucional, retail, family office? ¿Cuál es tu impresión respecto al asset class en Perú? Teniendo en cuenta que tú eres una de las pocas plataformas que ha nacido y se desarrolla en Perú, ¿no? Desde Perú con Banex Coin.
Fíjate, el mercado peruano en los últimos años ha ido creciendo, y eso lo hemos notado nosotros, que ha sido consistente. Sobre todo desde el punto de vista institucional. Muchas empresas están en este momento utilizando las criptomonedas como método de envío de remesas, como método de pago a proveedores, como método de transferencia de valor en general, o inclusive algunas lo hacen como resguardo de valor, a pesar de la volatilidad del Bitcoin. Se pudiera decir que se ve un avance, se ve un crecimiento entre la curiosidad, porque el retail es bastante también, pero sobre todo las instituciones empiezan a verle el uso a las criptomonedas, sobre todo a las monedas estables, como método de transferencia o un método adicional de pago que le resulta bastante económico, a diferencia de los sistemas tradicionales como el SWIFT o los sistemas que puede ofrecer la banca local. Creo que es bastante interesante cómo poco a poco están cambiando la manera de ver las personas o el público, las empresas que emigran a este tipo de métodos o estos métodos de pago alternativos. Generalmente lo hacen por dos razones: porque resulta más económico y resulta inmediato. Entonces, esas dos son factores clave que, a diferencia del sistema financiero tradicional, donde es costoso y es lento el proceso, el público o las empresas en general buscan este tipo de alternativas para hacer sus compensaciones o su envío de pagos, remesas, cualquiera sea el caso.
Gracias, Mervin. Claudio, there is a couple of questions in the Q&A regarding the profitability of the mining business, considering the fall in prices of Bitcoin. So there is a minimum price when the mining of crypto is not a good business. What is going on there? Because there is a lot of pressure between different mining listed companies and NASDAQ. No? The pricing of them has been falling probably 80–90% in the last quarter. What are your thoughts about this?
So there's going to be a consolidation in the Bitcoin mining industry for the publicly traded companies. And based on what you just said, what has happened, what has transpired during the last year? during the last years, a lot of companies took a lot of leverage, a lot of loans to be able to finance the purchase of miners. So we had two of the major players, NY Diggs and Galaxy Digital, Michael Novogratz, and they were lending a lot of money with other groups as well to these publicly traded companies. There was a lot of leverage, but they were buying miners at $11,000, $11,400, $12,000 per miner. The miner, and this is how you have to envision this, the miner is a commodity. So the miner price, and we get it right from Bitmain, just as these groups do. If Bitcoin goes up, the miner price goes up. If Bitcoin goes down, the miner price goes down. So currently, the miners are really inexpensive. So we are purchasing miners today in ranges around $5,000. So imagine if you were buying miners 3 months ago, 4 months ago at $11,400, and today you can buy that at half the price. So that's how you base your investment. So today's investment, and this is kind of what we built around our model, is that we kind of saw things happening in the market where we slowed down, and Melvin, you and I had this conversation in the past too. We actually, as a company, were considering taking loans from these big companies. We had a lot of offers. We were also offered to go into the public market and and do it via SPAC merger. We decided not to do that because of all this stuff that we see that just transpired. So today, it is an excellent time because the cost, my CapEx on this type of business, in this industry, 84% of the CapEx is the miner price. So imagine if you're buying at 11,400 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and now you're buying at 5,000. So my cost to produce one Bitcoin is extremely low today. It costs me around $12,800 to produce a Bitcoin. That's my cost going in. I know that. I know and I had said this and mentioned to you in the presentation, is Bitcoin mining uses Bitcoin mining calculator. It's a math equation. It's a math problem. The only part of this equation that is variable, right, that we can't control is the price of Bitcoin, but the rest we know. So if we go into the business and we do via the fund and via our investors, we don't look at it as, okay, what's going to happen in the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. We look at it, what's going to happen in the next 3 years. So we know that we're producing Bitcoin at $12,800, $13,000. In the long run, we're going to do very well. We're doing well now if you look at these numbers today. Obviously, over time, it gets better. And I think that's question one. Second question was, is it profitable? The answer is absolutely. The second one, what does it cost me to operate? So my operating cost is based on energy. So if Bitcoin stays anywhere above north of $6,500, and that's the number, anything north of that, I'm in the black. I am positive. When it drops under 6,500, and this is just using pure electrical cost as an operating cost, operating expense. Anything north of that, I'm in the black. So that means whatever I'm producing in Bitcoin will offset that electrical price. 6,500, 6,600 is kind of my break even on my operating expense. Anything above it will be positive for me. So therefore, you could see it's such and this is how I see it, it's such a good business. Our side doesn't have the volatility that you might see in currency, ups and downs, and you saw the biggest risk is volatility in the market. We don't see it because we're pretty flat. Whatever we produce is what we're making. But at the end of the day, it's a 3-year horizon, or if not more.
Okay, thank you, Claudio. Now, with Guy, there are basically two different questions. First, many scientists, also central bank governor, consider that the Bitcoin in general, literally, is like a garbage asset. No? So many things that there is no value, there is no fundamentals, and it's impossible to make valuation because it's basically a concept that is traded by speculators. So what do you could answer these challenges made by some, in most of cases, are very intelligent people too, no?
I mean, I think, well, first off, I take a step back, and value is not necessarily tied to, yeah, we traditionally think it has some fundamental flow for thinking of equities or securities, of course. But I think value is relatively what at the end of the day, it's really what someone is willing to pay for something. That's what defines value. And it's the same thing with gold. Although gold has value in the sense that it can be used in some technologies or it can be used for jewelry. A lot of people, particularly in the US, that hold gold bullion, they're not holding it because they think they're going to sell it to make some computer chip or they're going to create jewelry. They're holding it because they believe it's a store of value for a variety of reasons. We think that Bitcoin has similar characteristics to gold, that it can be a hard money, if you will. One, it's immutable and audible. One, the central bank can't come and devalue it like they would like to. Two, 21 million. And I mean, that's an important distinction, is that the inflation, deflation mechanics are locked with Bitcoin. It's always going to be 21 million Bitcoin in the world, and that's it. And if you think about that and you start modeling out what the price is today, what the price is 50 years from now, you think of less access in the space. Eventually, miners won't be able to get any more into the space. I think that's not true. I think it has value, and there are ways to value it. I think Claudio or maybe Mervin mentioned that there is a stock to flow, which is a traditional type of way to value Bitcoin. And there are other ways and metrics that obviously require some more details to go into, but there are ways to value Bitcoin.
Okay, considering the high volatility, usually in traditional assets, there are some, call it, defensive sectors. Is there that concept in the digital asset? Are there defensive digital assets? Defensive?
So not in the traditional sense of how we would think about defensive. What I would say is, I think long-term, we look at Bitcoin as more of a defensive play on digital assets. However, in the last year, it has not been acting like that. It's really been quite volatile, and it's actually been moving with risk assets. I would say when we look at the sectors in the sector chart I brought up, there is a sector called stablecoins. And I wouldn't say defensive in a sense where it generates returns that are not correlated, but it's defensive in a sense where it's effectively cash without having to take your assets off a crypto exchange. So you could actually rotate short-term into stablecoins, assuming you choose the right one and you understand the risk, and effectively be backed one for one by a dollar or euro or whatever one you select, and be able to avoid certain market events.
Regresando a Mervin, Rachel. Mervin, ¿tú sabes de las regulaciones potenciales que se pueden dar en Perú? Hay una pregunta del público que menciona incluso que en Colombia ya se está regulando algunos temas digitales.
Sí, sé que la superintendencia de bancos está trabajando en un proyecto para regular las criptomonedas, pero a su vez también están trabajando en un sandbox regulatorio, como en efecto se hizo en Colombia. De hecho, en Colombia está vigente actualmente el sandbox regulatorio, donde se está evaluando cómo se comporta el mercado cripto para poder generar una regulación. Acá creo que va a ser de la misma forma. Muy probablemente la superintendencia saque algún instrumento como un sandbox regulatorio para iniciar el proceso. No tenemos un espacio de tiempo para decir cuándo pudiera arrancar. La verdad no tenemos esa información, pero sí sé que están trabajando desde hace más de 3 años en temas regulatorios de las criptomonedas.
Okay. Claudio, there is a question of the public also commenting about the 21 million units at Bitcoin. Is that a number that could change sometime in the future, or is fixed and that will be the end of producing Bitcoin? And which could be the impact on the mining sector?
That's the beautiful thing about it. It cannot be changed. It was programmed. It was designed that way. The whole white paper, and I recommend everyone to look at it, published in 2008. It pretty much breaks it down. It's a very short read, but it tells you it's going to be 21 million because you want to have something that you can't print or make any more of. The United States government or any other country in the world, when they want to, for whatever reason, do whatever position they're at, monetary supply, etc., they can print more money. That cannot be done with Bitcoin. And that was one of the bases of the creation of Bitcoin, one of the foundations of it. With that said, there's 2 million Bitcoins are going to be mined between today and the year 2140. It's a descending curve. Every 3 to 4 years, the halving happens. What that means is every 10 minutes, the blockchain is closed. And by closing and engaging in that blockchain, the miners are rewarded with 6.25 Bitcoins that are produced every 10 minutes. That will drop in half in the year 2024, and so on, every 3 years, until we reach zero in the year 2140. So that's why a lot of money managers are looking towards Bitcoin, because of this short amount of supply and the demand curve being so big and increasing every day, the price will go up. And that's how we base it, and that's how we look at it as miners today. We see it as a limited supply continuously going down. The flow, if you look at a stock flow model, to 19 million currently, and the flow is going to be 2 million over these long amount of time. And that's how we see Bitcoin going up in price. I don't know if that helped, but hopefully it did.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Claudia. Kai, you mentioned that it's very difficult to predict a bottom on these markets. And considering the most important cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, we have already seen a correction of around 70% on prices. But there has been some surveys in Wall Street during the last couple of weeks where some of the people following cryptocurrencies believes that there could be another 50% downfall in the coming weeks. And the correlation with tech stocks are very, very high. So could you develop about your expectation regarding the short and medium term of Bitcoin and Ethereum prices?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, again, to clarify, there's not one person that knows the answer to this. So we're all prognosticating. At the end of the day, we're making educated guesses. I think a lot of the research you're alluding to was based on some market events that could drive the price lower. So one of these market events is the unlock of more Mt. Gox, which is an exchange that was hacked many, many years ago, and there was some issues. And there are some theories that there's going to be a lot of selling of Bitcoin that's been locked due to legal reasons for years. I think a lot of that risk is overstated. I think a lot of that, they actually have been selling over time. So I think it will be more muted. The event will be more muted and the impact will be less. That's my personal opinion. This space is very, very subject to headline risk. So this is why I say it's impossible for anyone to predict the true bottom, because the reality is if another company in the crypto space goes bankrupt tomorrow, that could cause the price of Bitcoin and other assets to drop. Now, if it's not impacting Bitcoin and the company is not forced to sell Bitcoin, fundamentally, that's not impacting Bitcoin. That's just a contagion risk and of headline risk. And that means it's a short-term risk. And theoretically, over time, you should see those gains return. So that's why we always push the idea of dollar cost averaging over time. Therefore, you don't know if you're hitting the exact bottom, but if you're getting close, as Claudio alluded to, being close is pretty good if you're looking 5 years, 10 years out, and the price per Bitcoin is 250,000 or above. You're not going to be mad if you bought it 20,000 instead of 10,000, but you will be mad if you miss a rebound and Bitcoin goes back up to 30,000, 40,000 in a week, and you lose a lot of that performance.
Okay, regarding that, there is also, and you mentioned in your presentation, different characteristics between these two main currencies, no? I mean, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Where do you see more potential for growth considering long term, 5 years, 10 years? Are both of these currencies the ones that everybody needs to have in their portfolios?
I think you have to separate Bitcoin from everything else in the space. I think Bitcoin is its own animal. It's a store of value. It's the longest running. It's over 10 years old. It's proven the technology works. There are no hacks. There are no issues. I think that's I look at that as there's potential for quite a bit of return there, but I look at that as becoming a store of value. So I would put that in an allocation similar to where I would put gold. Now, it's, again, to clarify, it's not acting like that today. It's trading more like a 2/3 of a tech stock and 1/3 of a store of value. But eventually it should become full store of value. If I'm looking at pure hyper aggressive growth and where I can really drive performance, I'm looking at smart contract leaders or platforms in that space, one of which is Ethereum. Again, I think riskier likely than Bitcoin for a variety of reasons, but I think the alpha potential could be higher long-term there. So when I think of where the technology is going to go, what new apps, what companies are going to be developing apps on top of Ethereum or Solana or Cardano, whatever blockchain it is, I think there's a lot of alpha potential there. And just to clarify, if you look at the smart contract platforms, the way to think about them is on your phone. If you have an iPhone, and in the iPhone, you go to your app store, and the app store is like these layer 1 smart contract platforms, like Ethereum, like Solana. And basically it allows these other companies or developers to come in and build applications on top. So you could download your Google Maps or maybe an Eldorado app at some point, but it allows the building of other apps and businesses. And that's why a lot of that value from those new apps and businesses can flow down to the app store or the smart contract platform.
Okay. Regarding regulations, what are the next outcomes in US? There has been a lot of comments and also senators, and the crypto industry have made a huge lobby in Washington about this. How do you see the regulation coming in US market?
Yeah, look, I think there are two sides of it. I would say the regulatory landscape today is much more positive for crypto today than it was 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago, the majority of Congress was against crypto outside of a few select. I think today there's now bipartisan support. So there are actually groups with both Republicans and Democrats proposing legislation, that pro-legislation, right, positive for crypto, that should help the space. There's a bill actually out there today, which may get in front of Congress in the fall, which should regulate the space. I don't think the chances are very likely that it gets approved, but I think it does help drive discord that some regulation is necessary, but in a positive way. So not regulation that's going to restrict. And I think we're past an inflection point of that happening. I think we should see positive regulation. I'm not sure at the timing. What I would say is because of the drawdown and what's happened in the space and some of the companies that were not doing a good job managing their lending risk, I would guess we have some kind of smaller legislation that perhaps regulates stablecoins and the way those are used in the US.
Ok. En el caso de Perú, Mervin, o de la región, yo sé que tú estás viendo también operaciones en Colombia y en Panamá. ¿Dónde has visto más interés a través de Ethereum, a través de Bitcoin? Y ya se habla del concepto de Metaverse. ¿Hay gente interesada en Metaverse? ¿Cómo sientes el contexto de inversiones?
Fíjate que generalmente está todo orientado hacia el Bitcoin, ¿no? Hablar de metaverso ya es un poco más profundo y si vamos a medirlo en cuanto al interés, creo que Colombia lleva la delantera por largo. Ahí tanto el comercio como el uso de las criptomonedas es mayor que acá en el Perú. En Panamá, por temas regulatorios, ha estado, digamos, como una especie de limbo. Recién ahorita los bancos están pensando en sacar productos relacionados con criptomonedas. Y si hablamos de metaverso, te pudiese decir que es un común denominador, ¿no? Hay amplio interés en el tema del metaverso. Todos quieren entrar, conocer, a pesar de que está en etapa temprana. Creo que la adopción va a ser mucho más agresiva que con las criptomonedas, ya que es una tecnología en la cual todos tenemos entrada o todos tenemos la capacidad de entrar sin tener mayores conocimientos, o la forma en que se está implementando es mucho más accesible a cualquiera desde el punto de vista de tecnología. Y desde el punto de vista de adopción, en cada uno de los países donde nosotros hemos tocado la puerta, donde hemos entrado, ya hablando de Latinoamérica en general, insisto, Colombia lleva delantera en ese aspecto. La gente usa criptomonedas, hace uso de las criptomonedas para temas cotidianos. Acá en Perú se ve sobre todo mucha curiosidad, muchas personas que quieren explorar, que quieren conocer, quieren entrar, quieren aprender cómo se mueve cómo puedes mover valor dentro de una plataforma, bien sea una wallet, bien sea un exchange, bien sea un intercambio P2P. Muchas personas están interesadas en dar los primeros pasos. Básicamente, esa es la radiografía global de cómo pudiera ver el mercado actualmente acá.
Claudio, in the mining sector, two questions. Are there regulatory initiatives in US regarding the mining Bitcoin sector? And which could be the main risk for that sector? Is it technological change? There could be a super chip coming that could be more efficient and profitable than anything else that is already existing and in production?
Well, I think the super chip, if it comes, it will be great. I don't see it coming that quickly. Intel has said they're looking if they can become a miner and develop a chip for the mining industry. But this is a 2 to 3 year project. Everything in this industry is always going to be 2 to 3 years away. Taiwan Semiconductors is the biggest chip maker for Bitmain today. So this takes quite a bit. So it's a while away. It's not so much the chip today, but it's actually the casing of it. And that's how you see the evolution of the miners. It's because of the heat that it produces. So the evolution of the miner is going to be the casing of it and how to make sure it doesn't heat up as much. And that's what Bitmain and other companies are working on. And they've already launched some type of products, but it's not scalable yet. Again, these are 2, 3, 4 years away. But we do see things coming, and we're positioned to take advantage of that as soon as it happens. But going to the regulation part, it's incredible because today there were so many miners that wanted to come into the United States that they just started calling every energy company out there. So now the energy companies and also the states, the public work companies, they've created state registrations where if you want to mine in the state of Texas and each of the other states, you need to register as a miner because the state needs to know where you're going to go, what you're going to do for the state as well. And we like to go to areas, again, it's an area that's stranded energy is needed, but you have to consider and also the noise because the miners are loud. So we need to go to areas where we're not going to be disturbing a small town, a small community. So all these things are taken into account by the state. So now that has already began that state regulation and eventually moves up the federal level. We as a company, we do have a lobbyist movement going to the federal level. You have the Toomey bill that just recently introduced. We have a lot of positive movement. But at the end of the day, we are the largest consumer of energy on the state of South Carolina. We're bringing to a small town, Gaffney, South Carolina. Just give you a quick number. We bring in $1 million a month of revenue of this town that didn't have it before. So this one particular site that is 4 acres in the total size with about $240 million of investment between miners, pods, and infrastructure is producing $1 million in energy revenue. Now, the incredible side to that, and let's say if I wanted to use the energy there, it's about 24 megawatts or 25 megawatts of energy. I need, for you to understand it, that 24 megawatts would be enough to operate 15,000, 16,000 homes. So imagine putting 15,000, 16,000 homes and energy consumption into a 4-acre lot. And that's what we did. And it was done in 4 to 6 months approximately. So the states love this. They love the revenue, they love the taxes. We're hiring local talent. We got these kids, smart kids from Target. We hired them, we trained them. So we as a company, and I think the industry in the United States is just trying to find the ways to add value and to give back, everything we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Claudio. Kyle, regarding Bitcoin, the only country in the world adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender has been El Salvador. At this point in time, how are the lessons of El Salvador? How do you see any other country adopting Bitcoin in the coming years?
I do, actually. We've had discussions with a lot of central banks in the past. I think you'll see one. I think we would have seen one in 2022 if it wasn't for this downturn. Maybe you will see it, but I think it just slows down the process. I know there's some rumors that some Arab countries are looking to adopt it. I know some countries are not in the process of adopting it as a currency, but they're close to getting there. So I know there's a bill in Brazil to make it a true financial asset. I know that's not the same as what El Salvador has done, but it's on the path to getting there. I think particularly smaller countries that have the types of issues that El Salvador has in the past, I think it can help diversify their portfolios and their reserves. And again, some of the other panelists on the call might be closer to the space and be able to comment. But I think, yes, in the next 2 years, I think you'll see at least a handful of other sovereigns adopting.
Mm-hmm. Which are the advantages for a country adopting Bitcoin? Is a material thing? Is something really positive?
Well, for one, it's less control of say the IMF, for instance. I know El Salvador is now having negotiations with the IMF, and frankly, the global central banks don't want other sovereigns to have access to Bitcoin or to have it on their reserve. So it's a little bit of taking the control of your own destiny in your own hands and trying to be less reliant on backing your currency or other currencies from, say, the euro or the USD, etc.
Okay, regarding Metaverse, this, especially in the last, I think, 12, 18 months, has created a huge expectation in different sectors in the market, including the tech business. No? Facebook changing the name for Meta, for example. It seems that the main Silicon Valley has also put an eye on Metaverse. So how real could be this a very good space for investment in the short term? Or is it basically the early phase? No? I mean, in Bitcoin, we have a little more than 10 years of existence. Metaverse is probably not than 3-4 years. So how do you see Metaverse space as a real possibility for diversified investments?
Yeah, I think long term, I think it's going to be a huge market. I think I showed you guys on the slide earlier the PwC estimates. Short term, I think it's a little bit more idiosyncratic. I think, and what I mean by that is I think certain projects might have good performance over the short term, but as a whole, it's going to be difficult. I think one was valuations, which thankfully they've come down now. But I think Facebook rebranding their ticker and their name to Meta actually a little bit artificially pumped up a lot of investment into the Metaverse tokens. And I think, yes, there are good developers and good projects out there that receive funding, but I think there are a lot of bad projects that also receive funding because of the hype and the media attention. So I think in the short term, it's going to be a little volatile. I think the long term, it's a transformative technology that we don't know the end use case for today. There are use cases, like I said on the screen, but I think the real ultimate end use case we haven't even thought of yet. And I like to think of it as in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when we were looking at the internet and how that technology was going to reshape the world. There was an interview with Bill Gates and David Letterman, and David Letterman was trying to understand what the internet was, and he couldn't understand it. And it took Bill Gates over and over again. And I think of when people try to understand the metaverse, it's very similar. It's a technology that they don't understand why they need yet, and you try to explain it to them. And there's some use cases today, but it's going to transform the way we use the internet, the way we use businesses, the way we pay for services in the future.
Okay, excellent. We are already finishing the Q&A session. Yes, I will ask each of you to have a couple of minutes to make final comments, starting with Mervin. Mervin, unos 2-3 minutos para hacer tus últimos comentarios, ya para cerrar el bloque.
Sí, bueno, primero que nada, para finalizar, le doy las gracias a CFA Society Perú por esta oportunidad y a las personas que estuvieron presentes, que nos acompañaron en esta jornada. El consejo que les doy es hagan cualquier tipo de investigación que esté a su alcance, consulten, hagan preguntas y documentense bastante bien. Si están pensando en algún tipo de inversión en cripto o en el mundo de las criptomonedas o blockchain o metaverso, hagan la investigación previa a la inversión, traten de no ser emocionales, traten de hacerlo de la manera correcta, con la mayor cantidad de argumentos sólidos y bases sólidas para realizar cualquier tipo de inversión. Gracias.
Gracias, Mervin. Claudio, your last comments and recommendation for our audience.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you again, everyone, for letting me participate on this event. I do appreciate that. I think what I like you, as Mervin said, I think the biggest thing we're trying to do in this industry is educate. I think education in what we do is the most important part. And that's what we're trying to do as a company, as individuals. We're just trying to educate people on what we do and how we do it. And once you start educating yourself, like everything else in the world, you start absorbing this information and make your own decision. And with that said, I think that decision, at least from my part, I believe in this. I believe in what we do. I believe in this ideology, this movement, this currency. I'm bullish on it. I think, and I've been in Wall Street, this whole Wall Street world a long time. I've never seen something like this. I've never seen something so revolutionary, such a disruptor in every aspect to it. And I recommend everyone to be part of it. Educate yourself, and as far as portfolio managers, as far as advisors go, I was a financial advisor for a long period of my career. It's not about putting a big position into this. It's by taking and diversifying a portfolio and taking a small stake, whatever that may be, either the Bitcoin mining side or buying the crypto space or Bitcoin itself. I'm a big believer, obviously, but just having to have a participation, being in it, don't be left out, because when it does go up as we believe, then it's going to add that balance and that growth to your portfolio at the end. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Claudio. Kai, your final comments, recommendation, please.
Absolutely. And thank you again to the CFA Society of Peru, Melvin, Bruno, thank you for having me, and my co-panelists. This was fantastic. And frankly, I think we all learned a lot here, even the panelists here. I'd like to take away and kind of piggyback off Claudio. Sorry, I keep jumping on his back here, but I think he nailed it. It's that this opportunity is something that many of us in the investment space have never seen before. And the way, but it is volatile and there are risks. And the way to manage that is it's better to participate than be left out in the cold. So how do you do that in a risk managed way? And it's small, size it appropriately, whether that's 0.5%, 1%, 3%, whatever is appropriate for the investor. That's what they should do. And over time, dollar cost average in. We don't have to buy your entire investment on one Friday. You can dollar cost average in over time and smooth out that ride. And the reality is, if we were discussing, Melvin, what's the downside of Bitcoin? Well, if the downside is another 10K down, and we talked about what's the true upside years from now, if half the market cap of gold is that 250K per coin, you're, from a risk perspective, that's a great risk trade at a small allocation over time. Your downside is 10K, so half, 50% down, and your upside is multiples up. That's a good risk trade. And so I think of participating in a small way over time is a no-brainer to me.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you, Kyle, Claudio, and Mervin. It's been great to have you. Solamente para despedirnos, les agradezco a toda la audiencia por la participación en este evento. El CFA Society Peru seguirá con nuevos webinars y también eventos presenciales en las siguientes semanas y meses, como lo hemos venido haciendo ya desde hace varios años. a todos los presentes los invitamos a participar en nuestros eventos futuros, así también evalúen unirse al esfuerzo y ser miembros del CFA Society Perú. A los que estén interesados se pueden comunicar con nosotros y encantados de darles más información. Muchísimas gracias y buenos días. Thank you very much to all. Take care.